Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Monday, May 26th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. The weather in Riverside today will see a comfortable high of 77.9 degrees and a low of 63.5 degrees. It's Memorial Day, a time to honor and remember those who have served our country. Coming up on Alex's News, we'll delve into the Supreme Court's reasoning behind allowing the dismissal of certain agency leaders, but not the Federal Reserve Chair. We'll also explore the distressing details of how an infant died at an unlicensed daycare facility in California. Plus, we LL bring you other important headlines from around the globe. All this and more coming up on Alex's News. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We begin this morning with a truly monumental development from the U.S. Supreme Court, a decision that could significantly reshape presidential power as we know it. For more on this, we turn to our legal eagle, reporter Ethan. Ethan, this is story 1 of 2 today. What's the latest from the High Court?
Grace, this is indeed a huge one. Just 4 days ago, on May 22, 2025, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a landmark emergency order in the case of Trump versus Wilcox, identified as 24A 966. This order, which was unsigned, fundamentally altered the landscape of presidential authority over independent agencies. It essentially granted President Donald Trump increased power to remove certain agency heads, while crucially, simultaneously carving out explicit protection for the Federal Reserve Chair. This is considered a pivotal moment with potentially far-reaching consequences for the administrative state, according to reporting from NPR, CBS News, Politico, and SCOTUS blog. It is a decision that could really turn the tables.
That sounds like a seismic shift. So, Ethan, for those of us who aren't legal scholars, what was the central question before the court that led to this rather impactful ruling?
That's a great question, Grace, and it cuts to the heart of the matter. The core question, as highlighted by NPR and SCOTUS blog, revolved around whether the president can fire the heads of independent agencies at will, or only for cause, meaning things like misconduct or neglect of duty, as stipulated by the statutes that created these agencies. For nearly a century, the Supreme Court's precedent, established in a 1935 case called Humphrey's Executor versus United States, generally affirmed Congress's ability to limit the president's power to remove members of these independent bodies. The idea was to insulate them from direct political pressure.
And it sounds like that century-old precedent is now being tested, or perhaps even chipped away at. Who specifically was impacted by this particular ruling from the Supreme Court?
Indeed, Grace, it certainly seems that way. In its May 2025 ruling, the Supreme Court, in a 6-3 decision, granted an emergency request from the Trump administration. This order allowed the administration to effectively pause lower court orders that had prevented the firing of Gwen Wilcox, a member of the National Labor Relations Board, or NLRB, and Kathy Harris, a member of the Merit Systems Protection Board, or MSPB. Both Wilcox and Harris were appointed by then-President Biden and had years remaining on their terms, as ABC News and NPR reported. While technically temporary, pending further litigation, the court's order strongly indicated an inclination towards ultimately siding with the president's authority to remove these officials. It is a powerful signal.
So the court is signaling an expansion of presidential removal power. What was the majority's reasoning for this, as articulated in their unsigned order?
The majority's reasoning, as articulated in that unsigned order, truly focused on the idea that because the Constitution vests executive power in the president, he may generally remove executive officers without cause, subject only to narrow exceptions. The court stated that the government is likely to show that both the NLRB and MSPB exercise considerable executive power, thus making them subject to this expanded presidential removal authority. This aspect of the ruling has been interpreted by many legal commentators, including those cited by Democracy Now! And The Nation, as part of a broader conservative constitutional revolution aimed at significantly altering the balance of power and the very nature of the administrative state. It is a fundamental shift in how Washington works.
Fascinating. Now, Ethan, you mentioned a carve-out that specifically protected the Federal Reserve. That seems like a major distinction from the other agencies. Why protect the Fed? Is it a different animal altogether?
That's precisely it, Grace. The court explicitly declined to give President Trump the power to fire Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. This is a critical detail. The specific legal reasoning cited by the court for this distinction is that the Federal Reserve is a uniquely structured quasi-private entity that follows in the distinct historical tradition of the first and second banks of the United States, as reported by NPR and CBS News. Barron's also highlighted this. This suggests the court views the Federal Reserve's structure and historical context as fundamentally different from other independent agencies, granting it a distinct legal standing regarding presidential removal powers. Legal experts, like those from Ogletree.com, note that the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 already provides that Fed governors, including the chair, may be removed for cause, traditionally interpreted as requiring misconduct or incapacity, not mere policy disagreements. This isn't the first time the court has hinted at this either. Earlier cases like Sela Law LLC versus Consumer Financial Protection Bureau in 2020 had already begun to chip away at the Humphreys executor precedent, but also noted the Fed's unique status. It seems the Fed will remain tethered by its own historical roots.
So while the president gains more leverage over some agencies, the Federal Reserve remains somewhat insulated. What are the potential consequences of this expanded presidential power on other independent agencies and their ability to function independently?
That's the million-dollar question, Grace, and it is indeed a cause for concern among many. Critics argue that allowing the president to fire heads of independent agencies at will, even if temporarily, could seriously undermine their independence and expertise, potentially making them far more susceptible to political pressure. This could impact the integrity of vital agencies like the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, and the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC. It could allow a president to more easily push a deregulatory agenda or influence enforcement priorities, as highlighted by an opinion piece published on donmoynihan.substack.com and discussed on Reddit's r/SCOTUS subreddit. The ultimate ruling in Trump versus Wilcox could have far-reaching consequences for the entire structure and functioning of the U.S. government, as the case will continue to be litigated and is likely to return to the Supreme Court for a final decision on the merits.
Ethan, that's a deeply insightful dive into a truly groundbreaking decision. We appreciate you keeping us on top of these legal developments. Thank you.
My pleasure, Grace.
And for our viewers, this extensive reporting draws on information from NPR, CBS News, Politico, SCOTUS blog, ABC News, Democracy Now!, The Nation, Barron's, Ogletree.com, donmoynihan.substack.com, and Reddit's r/SCOTUS subreddit. We'll be back after the break with more news, including Story 2 of our top headlines. We turn now to a deeply disturbing story unfolding in Royal Oaks, a community near Watsonville in Monterey County, California. An investigation is now underway into the death of a 3-month-old infant at what authorities allege was an illegal daycare facility. For more on this, we go to our reporter, Chloe. Chloe, what can you tell us about this tragic incident?
Grace, this is a heartbreaking situation that has rocked the community. According to reporting from ABC News, sfgate.com, and numerous other sources, deputies from the Monterey County Sheriff's Office responded to a home on the 100 block of Hillcrest Road in Royal Oaks this past Saturday, May 24th, at around 10:30 in the morning. The call was for a 3-month-old infant who was unconscious and not breathing. First responders provided aid, and the baby was rushed to a nearby hospital, but tragically, despite all life-saving efforts, was pronounced deceased.
That is absolutely devastating. And I understand, investigators quickly uncovered that this residence was operating as an unlicensed facility, with a startling number of children inside. Can you shed some light on that?
That's right, Grace. As authorities began their investigation at the scene, it became immediately clear this was no ordinary situation. Officials stated, according to ABC News and Patch.com, that at the time of the incident, there were up to 30 children of various ages inside the home. This immediately raised huge red flags about the legality and safety of the operation.
30 children. That's an astonishing number for what was essentially a private home. And I hear arrests have been made in connection with this. Who has been taken into custody?
Grace, in connection with the infant's death and the alleged illegal operation, 2 Royal Oaks residents have been arrested. They are 62-year-old Maria Cleotilda Marquez and her 35-year-old adult daughter, Johanna Marquez. Both women, according to reporting from svis.com and apnews.com, were booked into the Monterey County Jail. They face multiple serious charges, including involuntary manslaughter, felony child endangerment, which is also referred to as child abuse, and operating an unauthorized or unlicensed child care facility. Their bail has been set at $50,000 each, according to goldrushcam.com. We do not yet have information indicating whether they have posted bail or had any initial court appearances.
So this is a very grave situation with serious charges. What is the status of the investigation now, particularly regarding the cause of the infant's death?
Grace, the Monterey County Sheriff's Office has confirmed this is an active and ongoing investigation, as reported by sfgate.com and cbsnews.com. While arrests were made on suspicion of involuntary manslaughter, which implies a belief that the death resulted from the women's actions, specific details from preliminary autopsy findings regarding the direct cause of death have not yet been publicly released. The available reports do not specify whether the infant's death was directly caused by specific negligent actions or unsafe conditions, or if unavoidable medical events like sudden infant death syndrome or SIDS are being considered or have been ruled out. The Sheriff's Office is urging anyone with information about the case to contact Detective Josue Ramirez. They can be reached at 831-253-6068.
Thank you for that important detail, Chloe. This brings up a critical question. What exactly makes a daycare facility, quote, illegal, and what are the regulations in California that are allegedly being violated here?
Grace, that's key to understanding the severity of these charges. Operating a daycare facility in California is subject to incredibly stringent legal requirements and licensing regulations. These are primarily outlined in Title 22 of the California Code of Regulations and overseen by the Community Care Licensing Division of the California Department of Social Services. Essentially, any facility caring for children needs a license. This covers everything from staff qualifications, including criminal record checks, to facility standards like indoor and outdoor space and equipment safety, and strict health and safety protocols. According to publiccounsel.org and ca.gov, these are all designed to ensure children's safety.
So it's not just about having a license, but about adhering to specific safety standards. One of the primary concerns with an operation of this scale, caring for 30 children, would surely be the caregiver-to-child ratios. Can you explain what California requires in that regard, especially for infants?
Grace, this is where the numbers just don't add up. A critical aspect of these regulations is the mandated child-to-caregiver ratios, which vary significantly by the children's age and the type of facility. For infants from birth to 18 months, the required adult-to-child ratio in California licensed daycare centers is typically 1 adult for every 3 or 4 infants, according to cornell.edu and see equalityearlylearning.org. Given that Maria Cleotilda Marquez and Johanna Marquez were allegedly caring for up to 30 children with only 2 caregivers in their Royal Oaks facility, the potential for severe violations is immense. For instance, if there were even just 6 infants among the 30 children, the 2 caregivers would have been responsible for those infants alone, leaving no supervision for the remaining 24 children of other ages, based on the 1-to-3 infant ratio. This severe understaffing could directly contribute to inadequate supervision, which is a key factor in determining criminal negligence.
It sounds like a formula for disaster, Chloe. What kind of penalties do individuals face for operating an unlicensed childcare facility, especially when a tragedy like this occurs?
Grace, the penalties are substantial and escalate significantly if the operation results in serious harm or death to a child. Civil penalties for operating an unlicensed child care center can include $200 per day. If a child becomes sick, is injured, or dies due to a deficiency in an unlicensed facility, an immediate civil penalty of $150 per day can be assessed. But beyond the civil penalties, as we've seen here, the alleged circumstances in Royal Oaks involving a child's death mean that the operators also face very serious criminal charges, including involuntary manslaughter and child abuse. To put it in perspective, for licensed facilities, which serve as a benchmark for the severity of violations, penalties for serious injury can range from $1,000 to $10,000, and for the death of a child, they can range from $5,000 to $15,000, depending on the facility size. This underscores the gravity of the situation.
Chloe, thank you for breaking down such a complex and heartbreaking story. We appreciate you staying on top of this very important case.
You're welcome, Grace.
Here are some other headlines. Across the nation and overseas, May 26th marks solemn remembrances for fallen U.S. military. In D.C., ceremonies are underway at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial and Arlington National Cemetery, with PBS airing its 36th National Memorial Day concert tonight. U.S. Air Forces in Europe and Air Forces Africa participated in ceremonies at 17 cemeteries across 6 European nations, while the American Battle Monuments Commission held events at its 26 global sites. Communities from Houston to Jacksonville, Florida, and Manchester, New Jersey, to Southern California and Martinsburg, West Virginia, are holding local parades, tributes, and Say Their Name programs. All Americans are encouraged to pause for the national moment of remembrance at 3 p.m. local time. EDA-S, a day to reflect on the cost of freedom, a tradition dating back to 1868. In Hamilton, Montana, federal worker cuts at Rocky Mountain Laboratories and the U.S. Forest Service are causing significant economic strain. This federal initiative, reportedly under President Trump and Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, a rough acronym A, has led to layoffs for over 400 RML and Forest Service staff, plus $29 million in lost research funding for Montana. Local businesses feel the impact, and remaining federal staff report feeling, quote, discredited. While some are optimistic about Hamilton's resilience, recalling its recovery from logging industry declines, anxiety is high, with protests and calls for consultation from local officials. These cuts are certainly making waves, and not just in Hamilton. Meanwhile, in Germany, there's been a shift in accountability for Volkswagen's Dieselgate. A court convicted 4 former managers of fraud. Ex-Diesel development head Jens Hadler faces 4.5 years in prison, and top engineer Hanno Gelden gets 2 years and 7 months, though he plans to appeal. 2 others received suspended sentences. This comes nearly a decade after VW was found using, quote, defeat devices to cheat emissions tests, a scandal costing the automaker over not $30 billion. While former CEO Martin Winterkorn's trial is on hold, these convictions signal that the legal exhaust from this scandal hasn't fully cleared. Down in Miami, it's less foul play and more foul presence, as wild chickens are increasingly visible, even downtown. While some residents are clucking about the noise, many in areas like Little Havana embrace the rooster as a cultural symbol of renewal, with vibrant rooster statues a popular sight. However, with gentrification, these feathery friends might find their urban roost under threat, and there is even talk of a pecking order dispute with invasive peacocks. And a major environmental alert is active off India's Kerala coast after the container ship MSC Elsa III sank Sunday in the Arabian Sea. All 24 crew were rescued, but the vessel, carrying 640 containers, 13 with hazardous cargo and 12 with flammable calcium carbide A, plus nearly 450 tons of oil and diesel, has caused a significant spill. With containers washing ashore, authorities urge extreme caution. The Indian Coast Guard is fighting the slick, a serious challenge as the monsoon season begins. It has seen a situation that is truly shipping up trouble for the marine environment. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King, with Claude Sonnet 4.0, Gemini Pro 2.5, Gemini Flash 2.5, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.